All right.
Are we there? Hello,
Oh, hang
chicken
on,
1,
we're
2, 3.
hearing, probably an echo. You're getting an echo.
I'm not getting
Turn
an
that
echo.
off. All right.
Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was when we hit live there, we were actually going just to no one but us. So,
Oh,
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. That's what you're doing, wasn't it, bro? You're
yeah, bro,
testing.
why can't I?
You can't hear me.
I was testing. Yeah, you're pretty low. Hang on, I'm just gonna go over to the stream and have a listen to. So just
Chicken 1, 2, 3. Chicken 1,
Have
2,
a
3.
talk
Kia ora,
so I can hear.
kia ora.
yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't look like there's many of you out there so far. Shout out if you're out there. Throw a comment onto the board so we know we're not alone. But I think we might be.
oh yeah, no, you're sounding good on the stream, so that's all good.
Yeah.
Oh, the delivery's turned up. World War 3. Cools.
Is this the first time we've done Thursday night?
Yeah.
Is it?
Oh. Yeah, because we didn't do it last week. We were supposed to.
Ah.
Yeah.
Thursday night may not
So-
be the night.
It might be a bit slow. Yeah.
All the doll chicks came in. Everyone's off at the pub. That's a little racist.
Oh,
It used to be Thursday night though. Remember, Thursday night.
that's pretty old school. Yeah. They don't even call it the dole anymore, do they?
The work seekers allowance.
Is WINS a thing? Is that still a thing now? Work and income. Yeah.
Yeah,
Work and
yeah.
income New Zealand. Yeah.
It used to be the dole office.
We should have advertised it.
What, the dole office?
No, the
Oh, the show.
the show. I should have.
That's true.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Tashi George. Help us. Help us, Tashi George. Are you out there? Let me see.
Oh, what? You got to try these things? No.
Yeah, no dramas. It's not like we're invading Ukraine or anything. I think the stakes are pretty low.
I better get your screen up, Dad. Not that there's anyone call me too.
Oh, Dad's posting the advertising now.
What was I doing? NDI capture. Have you got that on the TV now? Is that working?
Yep.
Yep, that's working.
Oh, there we go. Kia ora pātena. Rere moana. Sui George, Mama Sue, she's here.
Got a Mum Sue.
Or Noti. Kia ora koutou. Our 7 viewers for this evening. Our first night on Thursday, the new time.
Yeah, a little quiet. A little quiet on a Thursday. It's a beautiful day outside, beautiful afternoon. If it was me and I wasn't here, I'd be out in my garden. possibly. This time yesterday I was out in the surf. Man, the water was still amazing.
Oh, yep. Did you go with Rangs?
Rangs slept in the car. He was feeling a little under the weather, so he jammed a moi.
Oh, right.
And me and my mate and the dog went into the surf. Beautiful. Dirty, though. It was actually, down West End, it can actually get a little bit clogged up. I think it's kind of where the currents sort of are, and lots of those little tiny pieces of wood, just like everywhere. Mm-hmm. And clams everywhere, clam shells. Don't know where that came from.
Kia ora, Christian. Bakery clerk at Purity Foods.
I can't see anything there.
Oh, just look at the camera, Dad.
Yeah.
Give a thumbs up.
interesting.
Give a thumbs up. Thumbs up. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's true. Look, none of the stuff is coming in on Stream
None
Elements.
come on the screen. I can't see anything. So, kia ora koutou e kare mau.
Let's go.
Thursday. Here we are.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of guests coming in tonight, Dad. We have Linda Smith popping in, Professor Dr. Linda Smith. And
Professor Linda Smith.
Professor.
Yeah, no, be really cool to have her here tonight, and an old friend back in the days. She can add on some interesting kōrero, and I guess around what drive her to during that period of time of the 70s. But, always good to have some people there from my generation to share some whakaaro and what were they thinking. Yeah.
What were they
Where
thinking
we
hanging
heading
out
to?
with you?
Yeah, well, hanging out. Because I used to crash at her place. And in the days we used to walk everywhere. We didn't have cars. I think Toto had a car. And Ringo had a car. But I don't think he had any registration or were on the fitness.
Typical.
It was a V-Dub. And that car took us everywhere.
Oh, well,
Because VW wasn't very good at all back in those days. Terrible lighting. But yep. And Linda was one of those young Maori women back in the days that was at university and
she's a prominent Māori academic.
Yeah, academic.
And she has been for a long time. I remember her book, Decolonizing Methodologies, how to decolonize research within universities. And a well-cited book of hers. So that's the kind of the an expression of activism as well.
Aye.
So she's a smart cookie, of course, the daughter of
very
Tā Herini Reid, the prominent Ngāti Awa academic also, isn't he?
Aye.
Yes, lots of academics. And we also have Nandor Tanchos coming on to today. Hey, kia ora Nuti. Hey, thank you for the invite for today out at Kaputerangi, the unveiling of Toi Kairako, my namesake. We revealed they put up a new carving of Toi Kairako. There was a great afternoon. So thank you for that invite, Nuti. It was great. Got a Christian? What? That sounds like toy. What sounds like toy? This sounds like toy.
Maybe he's watching it without pictures.
Oh, okay. Fun times. Hang on, let's see if I can pull up a photo of the new carving.
Not this toy, the other toy, you know.
No, this toy. I'm that famous.
That one.
Where's that light? I don't think this is the best way to do this, but let's see. No, that sucks. Stop it, toy. Stop it.
Almost.
Put the phone down. Get into focus. Anyway, that was the carving up there. That's me. That's Dad.
Hang on. Let me fix that.
Oh, yeah. Focus. Oh, there it is. Oh, look at that reflection of the light. That's my glamour light. But yeah, beautiful carving. Up on Ka Pūtarangi, there was the old pā site of Toi Kairako, our ancestor who came in here pre ngā waka, mā te waka, mā ngā waka. Mā te waka, ngā waka.
Te ara tāwhao. And he's got two whakapapa. Whakapapa to the, back to the Hawaii and whakapapa to here. Tānata whenua. And I mean, those guys didn't just randomly came over and bump into Aotearoa. Not at all. So there was already to and fro of people sailing between here, Aotearoa. I'm not sure what's the name of this place here prior to that. Yeah, so they came over here during that period at that time. Yeah, as Pūroto shared some of those kōrero today. Of course, everybody ended up in Tāmaki Makaurau, the tini o te mano, and then everybody start going their own ways and start drifting out. Yeah, and the good thing about that too, I guess, is around how do we maintain and carry the narrative, the kōrero, from the nehe to where we are today. And I guess that's a part and parcel of the continuation of putting the popo, the poua toi kai rākau. So, and hopefully we do something else in the future around that. And that's really what part and parcel what we're gonna do, or from us. In the events that are coming through next year and the year after, and it's around telling those stories and going to those locations, Ka Pūtarangi, and every part of the rohe o nā mai nā kuri a whare ki Tuhiro. And yeah, and carry on. Tērā kōrero tērā.
Oh, Gina Edmonds. Did I?
Yeah, I can't see the people coming online on the screen.
Oh, sorry, Dad. Yeah, I don't know why it's not working for you. Oh, there's Twitter.
Dad did tell me a story though directly after the unveiling, when we were walking back to the car. A story around when he named me Toi Kairako. Apparently, it was a spontaneous thing. It wasn't a planned thing. I came out. He was like, "Oh, shit, what am I going to call you?" And Toi Kairako came to his head, and that was that.
Yeah, I always consider Toi Kairako as a Napoleon of his time. And, well, he didn't conquer this place by invading other places, but maintaining his mana by sharing the space. And, yeah, hard to imagine, you know, those types of character. And how did they manage to place themselves in the space? And so he was a mover and a shaker. And I mean, very little I know even in those early days as a young father, you know, and like I was saying to Toy, because I was thinking, because I'm literally got him out, and I was thinking, because their mother and I sort of can't work out if there's any boys, I name them, but if it's a girl, then so she'll name them. Of course, end up with boys, and so I made the call. And so here we are, toi kai rākau, toi te huatai.
Oh, kia ora. Yeah, kia ora, Gina. Oh, well, my daughter is now 18 years old, so that would have been some time ago. Hence my dubious recollection of it. 18 years ago, I was in my
Yes, hey.
my mid-20s. Okay, so is Linda coming on? It's about that time, my bro.
Oh yeah. I've sent her the link, so she'll pop up.
Cool.
Pop up when she logs in, and I'll bring her in.
And yeah, we got the bro Nando Tanchos, the dreaded politician. Not as in dreaded.
Is he a politician still?
Yeah, well, he's a local government politician. He's a councillor.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, he's on council.
Yeah, he's Whakatane District Council.
Oh, yep, there's Linda there. Oh, so. Here we go.
Okay, here. Yeah.
Tara mai, yeah.
Oh, taiho.
I only see part of her face.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
Taiho. Sorry, I've been testing all week and I haven't cleaned things up yet. So, taiho fire. 1 second. What did I do there? There you are.
Kia ora. Hey, kei kona ia, Dad.
Ora, tēnā koutou.
Oh,
Ai.
tēnā koe. You look lovely this evening.
Okay. Oh. Wow.
Kia ora,
Ngā mihi
Tame.
Kia ora,
Ai,
Lynn.
ngā mihi.
Ai. Yeah. It was good to see you there today. We had the we put another poupou a toi kai rākau ngā kāpū terani, so we had all our kaumātua Ngāti Awa. Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah. So it was good. So no mai hara mai on the show with us, and can you turn the music down? Yeah.
He's whispering to me live on air.
It's all good.
Can you turn the music down, please?
I don't know, mate. I said turn the sound down a bit so I can.
Okay,
No mai hara mai the tuahine, and really good to have you here with us. And we have been having this conversation, sharing some thoughts about, the 70s, what actually drove us to be in the space when it wasn't really a very popular whakaaro, and the action and the whakaaro that we had during that period of time. And and that would be really good for you to share with us here on online on Facebook and Twitch, and share those kōrero. Yeah, and I guess that's what's been happening to date and what's been happening in Parliament. Tērā whakaaro no tērā, and the right for people to have a voice. But it was totally quite different to that that time and what it is and now. Sorry, I just got to take my hearing aid off, making some noise. Koe no kai a koe te kōrero le te sua hine.
Oh, well, kia ora koutou. Tēnā koe tame. Good to see you. You're looking well. When I think about the 70s, you know, I am in my 70s. Yeah. So it's like, that's a long time ago when we were young and actually not foolish. We were not foolish in our youth. We had a political agenda and we cared about it. And many of our colleagues are not here anymore. And you and others had a lot of courage. It's a different kind of context, I think, now when people are talking about protest. Hey, I think Ngā Tamatoa broke the mould when it came to protest. Yeah. I think a lot of people also think the protest is like just a performance. You know, it's about being on TV and being in the media. But remember, we didn't really have, well, there was no Facebook, no internet. Actually, we have very few photos of those days if it weren't for John Miller and a couple of others. So it wasn't the sort of publicity performance that I think we see these days. Yeah, and to get a political message across was really challenging, really difficult. And I think the fact that we did do that is amazing.
Aye.
Yeah, Dad was talking last week with Rawiri. He was talking about how, you know, everything was done on the landlines and the party lines, and that was how you guys were communicating in order to coordinate, which is such an amazing feat to think about, you know, compared to how easily accessible and how instant everything is today, and how you know, effective you were given the technology that you had back then. So it is interesting to see how that
technology. We had no technology. No. Our technology was your dad on his motorbike, you know, keeping us connected by moving around the country. We had telephones, yes, but it was based on a lot of trust that when people said they would do something, they did it. When people said they would turn up, they turned up. You know, those sorts of basic principles, I think, is how it all worked. And enthusiasm, you know, there was definitely energy and enthusiasm, but yeah, no social media of any kind. So I think one of the successes of Ngā Tamatoa was to mobilise literally hundreds and hundreds and then thousands of people.
Yeah.
Without social media,
when you're, I guess,
incredible.
looking at,
you're
looking at the sort of some of the. Go ahead, Dad.
Yeah, a lot of that was because there was so many different activities was happening, and particularly there was a huge involvement of the protest movement around the anti-Vietnam War stuff. So we kind of ride on that. And so you had the mainstream organizer that organised some of those march down in I'm just talking about down Auckland. There were thousands of people, literally thousands. So we ride on the back of that too. And so and I think we kind of organised some of it because we usually organise the K Road March, you know, a night before that. I think it's K Road was open on a Thursday. So we had the Ngā Tamatoa Polynesian Panthers against the war. And, you know, so we have all those kōrero around. The enemy is not the Viet Cong, and the Pākehā is that kind of kōrero. And so we kind of rely on that. So we build up our support around that. And so having those relationships, build our relationship with all the different activists that was happening around the Vietnam War. There was the Progressive Youth Movement, the PYM. They were part and parcel of the New Zealand Communist Party. So you got all the Trotskyites, and then you got the Students Against the War. And so we kind of left on the side of that, and that's how we.
Well, we had all those alliances.
Yeah, all those.
There were a lot of alliances and collaborations. They were very, I mean, we didn't necessarily get on with them for all things, but we agreed on some things. And I think, yeah, the anti-Vietnam War was one where everyone did agree and did come together.
Yes.
And the anti-racism stuff was where we came together. But in other areas, we didn't.
Yeah.
But I remember, I don't know if you ever came to socials, that we had these socials, at the student union at University of Auckland, and we'd have the Trotskyites, the communists, the socialists coming in the back door, the Chinese communists, and then we'd have all the respectable people who didn't really want to be associated with anything political coming in the front door, and we were all trying to have a social, have a good time, raise money, but it was that sort of era where there were lots of different political ideologies around, political ideas, and I think we had to navigate those and learn who to work with. I mean, I didn't trust some of them, to be honest. I thought they were a bit sleazy and dodgy and a bit disrespectful. Not really into Māori, ideas. If we weren't there, they would have ignored us.
Oh, no,
but
totally.
That we were there and we were active meant they had to deal with us.
Yeah.
And then there were some who just flirted with every kind of group there was. They were in all the different groups. And I know, there were times when we were quite suspicious of people who seemed to move around the different groups.
Yes.
I think we thought they were spies. We didn't think they were like totally committed.
Yeah.
And we always wondered what's their agenda? What were they doing? And then of course we'd think, why are those Māoris in that group? Why are they supporting that kaupapa and not a Māori kaupapa? So we had ideas, I guess, about all these other groups.
Sounds kind of similar to what's happening down in Wellington today. There's a lot of different groups, but at the same time, it sounds like you guys, when you talk about, there are different political ideologies, that people potentially were a little bit more well informed. I'm assuming here about what they were politically trying to achieve, possibly.
Well, I can't speak for the other groups, but I know for the most part, we did talk strategy. We were strategic. We always had those conversations about what we were trying to do. Why were we there? Why were we there with those people? So I did think it was much more strategic.
Because I was trying to get this out of
our messages.
I was trying to get this out of Dan and Rawiri last week. Was how much of a feeling of just total revolution in terms of total revolution rhetoric was there, or how much talk was there about shifting policy and influencing policy change within the system that was there?
Yeah, to be honest, for myself, I didn't really have a great idea about policy. I learned about policy from that process. I thought we were in for, revolutionary social transformation.
Yeah.
That it was a radical agenda. I think I understood it as a radical agenda for the whole of society, and the implications of what it meant to have Te Tiriti o Waitangi as the sort of kaupapa for the governance of Aotearoa, that was a radical thing. at the time, and most people told us we were dreaming, that it was an impossibility. I learned about policy through those experiences, but that wasn't really our target.
No.
No. I think it was much more revolutionary. What do you think, Tame?
Yeah, I think we when people talk about revolution, immediately they say, "Oh, we're going to go to war." It's a war. It's a war of consciousness, and building. I know when I was in Christchurch, and so we had to be more kind of creative, and also Christchurch was a lot harder, a very smaller Maori population. And the racism in Christchurch was pretty hardcore. They were quite upfront about their feelings. So we went in the picture. So we had to find a way that we can win the hearts and the minds of the people that we are focusing on, and just to talk about te reo, or just to talk about shall we participate in the war. And so all that bringing those kōrero, how do we reach to the minds and the people? So we had to go to the pubs. So we go to all the pubs there. So we had to create an event. We had some young Maori guys, Steve Apirana and them. They were good. They play a lot of Jimi Hendrix music. So we use that as a platform, so we can move a lot of Maori. So for us at that time, every Maori in the streets are Ngā Tamatoa. And so that's how we kind of built out. So everybody thought there was only 4 or 5 of us, but so we kind of put that kōrero out there, that every Maori on the street are Ngā Tamatoa. So that's how we kind of mobilise the people in Christchurch. This is just before I went up to Auckland. So there was Ted, Nia, myself, Kurarawiri, Mike Chadwick, and another guy, Watson, Steve Watson. So we only had a very small group. So we did strategically sort of have our little secret meeting at Ted Nia's place, and work out how we're going to do that. And because there was a lot of people against us, they thought we were a little bit nutty. And so, but we also used the Anzac Day as a place of going there and bully our way into the space, and because around the Vietnam War, and but they're very patriotic, particularly in those early '70s, and so, but we were quite passionate and quite excited about just doing that. And so so we had a good little team there, and so I kind of worked on that before I started heading up to Auckland and did my thumb up, and no cars, we didn't have a phone, and really a lot of those for us in Christchurch was kanohi ki te kanohi, tanata ki te tanata, really, and taking those opportunities to go to those different events. So there was a group of Pākehā that was opposing to the American satellite, or they had some stuff down in Mount John down in South Island. So we used that as another place. We put ourselves in there, Ngā Tamotua Tuatoru. So that's how Ted and I and our little small group managed to put a Ngā Tamotua whakaaro during that period of time.
Yeah. I mean, you're right about the consciousness. A lot of it was about changing the consciousness of Māori in the first instance, I think.
Yeah.
And then Pākehā, but definitely it was that sort of raising their consciousness and making them look at our history differently.
Yeah.
And to see. And to be honest about, what had happened to us, and stop living in a dream that, this was the promised land, in a sense, by reminding them that actually this was our land.
Right.
This was our land. It wasn't we shouldn't feel grateful to be on it. And, you know, I think part of what we learned through that consciousness raising project is we actually had to do more than that, remember, because that's then out of that came all the programs that Ngā Tamatoa ran, like the court program, the education program, the health program, the, you know, having to actually get down there and put in place these programs that allowed us to spread our message, but also to practice what our message was about, and to reach people who had no voice. I mean, we thought we had no voice, but we were able to voice our ideas. But then in that process, we found more and more and more of our own people who had even less voice, whose voice had been silenced, and whose voice didn't count, you know, even amongst our own community. So I think in the end we learned and we had to do a range of things, right? Had to talk to powerful people, and, you know, you and Sid and Toda were really good at speaking. They call it like speaking up to power. We had to speak to, well, invent our own media communications because we didn't have any. Had people who were good at speaking outward to our own communities, people who could speak to Pākehā, people who could engage, you know, our kaumātua in a sense. Because I think we did get support from, but they were often of the kaumātua generations who understood what we were saying, whereas the younger ones had no understanding.
Yes, so I think with the first lot of kaumātua that supported Ngā Tamatoa was the writer. I think his name is Pat Baker, and from Whakatō here. And he was the first kaumātua that came out publicly and support us, because we were doing the campaign, no Māori go and fight Pākehā war. So that was our slogan. And so we just go and disrupt the march, and we start marching. No Māori go and fight Pākehā war, just doing those sort of types of action. You know, so, you know, we got really abused. You know, fellas were lucky we can fight, so we had to kind of physically kind of protect ourselves. And doing those sort of types of action. So people like Pat Baker saw us doing that. And so he was the one that kind of approached us and had a talk to Ted, and was through seeing those type of action. He was looking at, what the hell, who are these young fellas? What are they doing? And so through that action, generates so he kanohi kitea, so the eye can see, and so we kind of build our relationship around that, and talking to share some. I mean, I'm still learning the use of the Pākehā language, and I trying to navigate myself around that, and I only just finally discover I have a voice. You know, for a long time I didn't have a voice. You know, whakamā, anxiety, you know, all of that. I had all of that. And then by the time I was 18, I go, boom, it just came out, you know, so just, I don't know, it happens, you know, and as soon as I finished my apprenticeship, and that's it. So I have a choice where I carry on and participate in mainstream activities within the community, or we talk about who am I, what am I, who the hell am I, and all of that stuff. So we kind of talk around that, kuai tātou, you know, and all of that.
Yeah, and you know, in Auckland at the time, for Ngā Tamatoa, people came from all over. You know, there were those of us who were students, but there were a lot who weren't students. They were from different walks of life. you know, when I think of the kaumātua who supported us, I think of Ngoi Pewhairangi in Tukumaru Bay, the Kāwiti whānau at Kāwiti Marae, because that's where, Waiomio, where the Ngā Tamatoa were able to kind of stage the protest at Waitangi. There were kaumātua at Tuakau. So wherever we were opposed, there were also those who were prepared to listen and who, you know, would be licking our wounds because we'd been like totally slammed at some hui, and there were always others who would like commiserate with us and go, never mind, dear, you know, carry on. It's you know, you guys carry on. You're doing a good thing. So there was always that support. But you know, there were a lot of people, as you know, Tame, who were silent, who didn't support us. Who, in the end, you know, they did well out of what Ngā Tamatoa achieved. They did well out of, you know, some of the Te Reo Māori progress that we've made. You know, because remember, native speakers, you were unusual because a lot of native speakers looked down their nose at those of us who couldn't. Not all of them, but a lot did. You know, I personally got a lot of support from people like Toby Curtis and Arapata Tahana, you know, because they were working, Selwyn Muru, they were working in Auckland. I'd run away sometimes from varsity and just hang out with, you know, one of them, I think, just because I felt safe with them. They were really good. They were all like papas because my own dad was away. And there were people who cared and people who supported us. And it's good to remember them.
Yeah. Well, I think I remember my first interview on radio, and that was with Selwyn Muru. Selwyn Muru was working for for the national station, Radio New Zealand. And it was an interesting thing, you know, because I never been in there in that situation before. So I was thinking on my toes. So he was asking those questions, and he started asking. I just came up with some random kōrero, you know. And so all I had in my mind, I think I can still remember some of the conversations that I did have with Selwyn Muru. Overthrow of the Pākehā system. We started a revolution, and so that was really my kōrero, build up our own community. So I'm just making that up as I'm going through my head. I don't know how, but I had this use of the language. And I did more, I'm not sure whether it's my head was talking, whether it's my heart was talking, or my puku was talking. But it was, you know, it was coming out. And that's how I felt during that time as a young man. And I mean, we didn't have a manual book. We didn't have a manual book how to do those things what we were doing. So we kind of created. So like going to have a sleep, we would have a little quick chat with each other. What do you reckon, mate? What shall we do? You know, so we have those sort of kind of kōrero. Or we go down to the Kiwi pub and have a few drinks and have a chat. And having or we will meet up with a whole lot of different radicals. And for me, I met up with a whole lot of different Pākehā that came through from activists from the First World War, the conscious objectives from that. So I met quite a few of those. And I spent a lot of time having a conversation with a lot of those guys, because there were times, because when I had no idea about socialism, I had no idea about Marxism, but I was introduced to that language. It was a whole different world altogether. We kind of opened my mind and started to learn more about that. For me in those early days, the enemy is the Pākehā, the one with the blue eyes, blonde hair, you know. And it took me a hell of a long time to work it out that, I had to think more about that. I had to think more about that.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with myself about that. And so I had to say, ko wai taku huariri, ko wai te whewhaia. So those are the types of conversation that I have with myself. And also going back to Ruatek, I was pretty lucky because the person that those korero, particularly with the korero that brought me up there, you know, he didn't rubbish me, but he had to talk to me about it. So he was the one that able to, and he would say things, oh, he te tunu ke koe ki o mātou nā pāpā, meaning you're like, nā tamato is like my tipuna, that fought against his pākei hara mai kone, te takahi tō mana. You know, so I had those kind of conversation at home, and allowed me to guide myself that to, you know, because I need something, I need somebody other than ourselves, and I need to, so I had to go to my home base. My home base helped me to establish my whakaaro. And I think, so he said, kai te pai noa hukoto. He didn't say, kai te pai noa, talking the lecture to me, but to us what we were doing. So that kind of validated, so I felt really comfortable about that. So that enabled me, okay, I hitchhiked back to Auckland again and carry on and do the things we were doing. So that was a really big help for me, and that time.
I'm quite interested with, after Ngā Tamatoa, you guys diverged, I guess, in your practice of activism. Dad stayed quite visible on the street, but Linda, you went into academia and produced works like decolonization methodologies, where you're actually trying to actively within the academia shift perceptions. And I'm just, you know, when Dad was saying, oh, you know, he was thinking in his head, you know, who am I? Who is the enemy? Were you doing the same thing inside of academia?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because we were forced to, in a sense. It was easy at first when it was simple. It was about Pākehās. You know?
Yeah.
It was about
Right, the Pākehā.
But then it was like, yeah, but then the us part wasn't reliable either, because some of us, i.e. Māori, weren't that on our side either. So it was like, it wasn't all of them and it wasn't all of us. It was some of us and some of them. So it, you know, became much more complex and nuanced, and really then became, you know, much more, I think, about the ideas and the philosophy and the system, starting to see the system as the problem, and then starting to see really the way in which the Tiriti o Waitangi could be a solution to that problem, but also seen in our past. And I guess that when I was first at university, I did a history degree. I majored in history at a time when the University of Auckland did not teach any history of New Zealand. And while I was doing history, I majored in medieval history, European history, the Enlightenment, all those things, which at the time I thought was irrelevant. There was one New Zealand history paper that Sir Keith Sinclair taught that I think the 5 Māoris who were in it all walked out and discussed. You know, he was seen as a really important New Zealand historian. Yeah. You know, but they use terms like the Māori War.
Yeah.
You know, whereas he used term like the New Zealand War. Yeah. But all our student colleagues, as far as they're concerned, the Māoris caused the war. The wars after the Treaty of Waitangi was signed. So it was a really difficult time. I became a teacher after Ngā Tamatoa. I went teaching, because when I was in Ngā Tamatoa, I was in the education program, and I was talking to schools anyway. You know, that was my job. I'd go and talk to school assemblies and talk to groups, and, you know, there were groups in Remuera and sort of nice groups who were prepared to give us money that I would go and speak to. And, you know, in the end, I trained as a teacher. But always retained this kind of sense of one of the systems that I think we had to look at more deeply was the system of knowledge. of Western knowledge and Pākehā knowledge. What is it that drove the ideas and the discourses and language that we were burdened with in colonisation? And, you know, that then led me on later in my later studies to think about, you know, the decolonising part of it, the decolonising of ideas and the way in which, you know, to me, academic ideas and academic knowledge is very colonising because it legitimates the way society has treated Māori. And when you think of all that research that was being done on Māori coming out of universities, all the experts at the time were not Māori. And so, you know, the worst thing at that time for us as students was to sit in a class. It'd be like 3 Māori students if you were lucky, and you got a Pākehā lecturer who basically taught the history of your country and omitted anything Māori about it.
Yeah.
And basically erased everything you knew while you were sitting there. It was really crushing, you know, for many of us. And it wasn't just in history, it was geography, it was political studies, you know, everything we studied, we were invisibilized. And those are the things I went on to examine.
If you could,
I never much, to be honest, I never really much liked the public aspects of, you know, the political activism. I like the strategy, I like the ideas, I like some of the protests that we went to, and then the other ones I was a complete chicken at, you know, and it was like, who do you hang on to, who do you hide behind? I had enough experience of it to know that I couldn't really sustain myself as a frontline activist, and I would be more useful as a backroom supporter of our activists.
I don't know if it's a backroom supporter. I think that's underselling it a little bit. You know, it takes many different angles to make the kinds of shifts and changes that you guys did throughout the mahi that you've done. And we're certainly very appreciative of it. And of course, this year is the 50 years since Ngā Tamatoa. That's what gets me as well. When you guys started this back in 1972, well, Dad's 70 this year. 50 years ago, he was 20. You know, it's you guys were doing incredible work back in you know, when you were babies, really, to a certain extent. I don't know, maybe you guys were older
and
those days.
Who would have thought pubs were places of intellectual discourse? But they were. In those days,
it's very communist of yous.
That talked political theory, talked ideology. Had poets, like, you know, there were people like Sam Hunt and other poets who would come to a pub, stand up, perform. People would criticise them and tell them they were useless, but they'd get up and they would do their poetry and get free beers, you know, and
whiskey.
But they get whiskey, then they get drunk, thrown out of the pub, and then they go to another pub. But there were certain pubs in Auckland, at least, where that's what people did. They talked about ideas. Yeah. You know, it didn't just happen in universities. And a lot of wharfies. So when I was a student, a lot of wharfies were at university. Yeah. Like, I think they had pretty good labour conditions until they had a big scrap with the government. But a lot of wharfies would meet in the pubs downtown. You know, they had their key pubs, have arguments, come up to university, they'd argue with the lecturers because they often knew more about political theory than some of the lecturers. Then they'd go back down the pub and then they'd go to work.
And that's it. That's where I was. A lot of my learning was around that, and particularly working with the wharfies, the Watersiders Union, a lot of those outside the union, but there's a big group of activists within the Seamen's Union, a lot of guys and they were pretty active, and so So I think for you know, because I saw you guys, so he's all the Māori academic going to university, but there was a very small group of us outside that, outside that,
Yes.
and you know, learning new things. And so there was myself, Hachi Pōnika, yeah, so we were doing our own action and we're doing our own thing. Sometimes we don't listen to anybody else, but we did our own stuff. And but what I have learned is going to the freezing works, because we're really focusing around where the bulk of our population was. So we kind of work around. There were some of us we kind of focused on trying to get where all the Māoris in the freezing workers, and all the Māoris in the industry, and so. Even I spent a few months there working in the steel mill down in Otahuhu, just to try and reach out and have a conversation with people in the factory. And so by then I was quite noisy back in those days. So I make sure that they're here at kōrero. So using that place as a platform to share some thoughts and ideas. And I think it worked, you know, and so we were able to pull people to participate. Particularly during the Vietnam War. And so we brought a lot of people, other than the students, like yourself, you bring the people from there, but we went and get all where the Māori population were hanging out. They were in Ponsonby, they were in Parnell, and most of our Māori population was all around. Mm.
Places where they can't afford to live now, but you know, Parnell, I used to go up there and find my cousins in the TAB. That's where I knew I could always meet them at certain times of the day. And I've forgotten the pub down the bottom of the hill, but you know, if you needed to find people, you knew where they were. And so I'd go up to Parnell, and there were a lot of Māori there. One of my cousins was really well known. She's still alive, but she was seen as, you know, this woman who lived in Parnell, and all the shopkeepers, I could just go into any of the shops and say, oh, have you seen, you know, Mary, she was known as there. And they'd go, oh, she comes in at about 11 o'clock. So I'd go out, have a cup of tea, come back and wait for her, and sure enough, she'd turn up. There were Māori in Grey Lynn, Māori in Ponsonby, the inner city, That's where you could find them. And then there were new populations in Otara and Mangere. So when I went out teaching, that's where I went to Mangere. Taught there first. Then I taught out at Avondale and Kōwhai Intermediate in the city. And then, you know, then I went on to university again to do a master's degree.
It's interesting. You're talking about sort of the I guess the gauntlet or the fire that everyone had to walk through in order to get their ideas out and to have that experience. And I guess that's one of the key differences in terms of the experience of today and some of the protesting that's happening, in terms of you at the moment you can do that from your home in your quiet little cave, and you can kind of type some stuff and then, you know, only hear what you want to, which is in the same way, which have the same ideas as you, right? Chamber. And so, that's right, the echo chamber. And so back in your day, you went to the pub and people would hassle you and challenge you, and then that might change things. And it was much more face to face and not so Facebook to Facebook, you know? So it's
lots of different ideas. I mean, you'd think you'd have an idea, but it was very contestable. But actually not cruel. People weren't cruel or mean about things. You know, you could have a discussion about some ideas. And I mean, there were a lot of communists around, because communism was
in the forefront,
seen as a valid sort of political philosophy. And there were different forms of communism. You know, there was the Chinese forms, there was the Trotskyists, the Leninists, the kind of Russian forms. China was just really coming into the Mao Zedong era. So there was the Mao Zedong version of communism. Then there was socialism. And then there was Marxism, which was the kind of philosophy underneath it around capitalism. All those ideas were all at play.
And all down at the pub.
Yep.
Yeah, and discuss all of them. And we'd have big arguments about whether, you know, Māori were a class.
Yeah.
And we'd go, no, we're a people. You know, what do you mean we're a class?
Yeah, working class.
Now, so are you a race or a race or an ethnicity?
And it sort of helped you hone your ideas, but understand how you had to defend them as well, where they were different.
Hey, so we have, like I was saying earlier, we're 50 years, and we're going to be putting on some celebrations of some sort down in Wellington in September around when the petition was delivered. So hopefully we can pop a couple of bottles of red wine and talk ideologies down there, and see if we can make some more progress. Hey, thank you for coming on, Linda. It's an honour to have you with us and to share these stories of Ngā Tamatoa and the contribution that you guys have made. And we'll see you down in around the trap. See you down in Wellington, and definitely anyway.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. It's always good to see your father, and he always looks well. It's good.
Yeah, keeps us on our toes.
Keeps us busy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kia ora. Hey, good night.
Kia ora, Linda. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, oh no, that's good kōrero. I've got to talk to her about, because I used to crash at your place. There were several places there, and she was one, but it was good kōrero from her. Yeah.
No, that's good. Oh, well, we've got Nando Tanchos, who is a Whakatane district councillor. Of course, many people will remember him as a Green Party member of Parliament back in the day as well. Hey, there you are. Kia ora, Nando. We've got you up there as Professor Linda. Oh, no, you're gone now. You're no longer Professor Linda Smith. You're Nando. How are you doing, brother?
Yeah, good. Yeah. Tēnā koutou. Good to see you all. And mihi to Professor Smith, who's a real legend. Hey, I didn't know about her Ngā Tamatoa history, but just as a in terms of her academic work and decolonizing the university institution, the academy, it's really powerful work that's it's rippled out all across the world, and Indigenous people all around the world. You're taken heart from her work. So, I just want to big mihi to her.
Hard act to follow there, Nando.
Indeed.
Good luck, brother. Yeah. Hey, no, great to have you here, and I thought it'd be amazing to have you on and have a kōrero. Well, I often bring up inside of this show local government stuff, and everyone starts yawning and rolling their eyes, and I'm like, no, it's really interesting. Believe me, it's fascinating stuff. Yeah, my brother doesn't believe me.
No, you're doing good work.
You're doing good. Some of it okay, but but it's good.
It's usually good over a couple of tequilas, and then you can kind of.
Hey, someone has to deal with the bureaucrats, or else they'd be running amok through our communities, building things where they shouldn't.
Well, I always remember you way back in the early days, Nando, and as somebody that I have known. This guy driving around on this bus and roaming around the country, and you were a character that always seen around those different activities that things are happening around the motu. And in the days you came out to my place over at the gallery up in the Ruatoki, and during that time, so we know each other for a long time. But I also want to thank you for your support for the time I was locked up in Mount Eden prison, and thank you for that, for your visit, and that kind of support. So I guess you're somebody that and I have a lot of respect to your thinking and your thoughts, your whakaaro. And I guess the question for me is, what drove you back? What drove you there? What made you go there, where you are, during those early days?
First of all, thank you for those very kind words, because you're someone I deeply respect. So to hear that is quite meaningful for me. And I remember, I think the first time I met you was visiting the Tūhoe embassy in Tane Atua. I think that might have been the first time, maybe. But yeah, that's why we've had a long association. Yeah, it's interesting because I come out of an activist background. I've been an activist all my adult life, and before even, I suppose, and have very much been involved in on the ground kind of stuff, kind of frontline stuff. Well, I was really getting involved with the Green Party when the Green Party became independent of the Alliance, and I saw a political party that was able to represent, and at that time, the only party that I could see that was able to represent any kind of ideas that had any meaning for the 21st century.
Yeah.
So I got involved in that, and then, through that process went into the Parliament. And I suppose what I found, because my background, I heard you talking about communism and socialism before. My background, I came out of the anarchist community more.
Yes.
And still hold a lot of those values. And so I'd always been deeply suspicious of these kind of formal institutions of power.
Yeah, sure.
And when I went into Parliament, I didn't have any hope of making any real change. I kind of went more or less symbolically to say, you can be a dreadlock rasta, you can be yourself authentically, and you don't have to try and pretend to be something else. Yes. And you can sit in a place like that as an equal with all those other people and do just as good, if not better, a job than anyone else there, But what I found when I was there was that actually there was opportunity to make real change. Now, not radical change. I mean, it wasn't constitutional change. It wasn't breaking down Babylon.
Yeah.
But able to do things like the Clean Slate Act, where people, if they've got a minor criminal conviction, they can put it behind them after 7 years. And I still get people to this day talking to me about how important that was for them in terms of their life journey. And so even though the change is kind of incremental and in some ways at the margins, it's still positive, for people, for real people. And so being in council is a bit the same. It's different from Parliament. It's really on the ground. It's really local.
Yeah.
You're much more connected with what you do, because in Parliament sometimes it feels like you're chucking bricks over a wall, and you don't know whether someone's building a house out of them or it's smacking them on the head and knocking them out. And your information is so filtered.
Yeah.
And how was your
council? It's you right there. So
just staying down in Parliament, because you stayed there for 1 term. And you
Parliament, I was there for 3 terms.
And the House for 3 terms. But when you left, because you voluntarily left, so you voluntarily left. What was that decision for you after being down there for 3 terms?
So I went in with the idea of doing 3 terms because I figure it's a complex place, and I see that in council too. People think they can get in there and change everything, and it's like it takes you 3 years just to figure out, get a beginning understanding of how the machine is really. So I figured, well, okay, I'll spend a term figuring out how it works. I'll spend a term introducing some things, and then I'll spend a term finishing those things, and that'll be me. It wasn't exactly like that, but I always figured it's going to take me a good 9-year commitment to really do anything meaningful. And I got towards the end of that 9 years, and I found, I think I was quite good at it. I was quite comfortable. I actually felt, I didn't feel like an imposter there. I felt like I totally had a right to take a place there, as long as I had the support of people. And but what I found is I was getting a bit too comfortable. It was starting to get to the stage where actually if I stayed much longer, I wouldn't want to leave.
I
remember somebody they got voted out and they said to me it was the worst thing that ever happened, and I couldn't understand how that could be the worst thing that could happen to someone. But it was getting to the stage where if I got voted out, it would be, and you can only do that kind of job if you're not that attached to it, because you've got to be aware that you've got to maintain voters. But if that's all you're focused on, and you see that with government after government, if your focus is on maintaining votes, then why the hell are you there in the first place?
Yeah, if you're on the slippery slope of appeasing your constituency, and where that kind of popular politics sort of the wind blows, and you're not able to stick to the values and the principles that you arrived at the place with. But talking about that, I'm sure that your values and principles remain the same, but did you, during your 3 terms at Parliament, have a shift in appreciation for the role, because coming from your anarchist background, where you have that suspicion of any sort of organised sort of space, did you have a different appreciation of the mechanics of running a society, and of course, knowing that it's not perfect, but a greater appreciation for it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's difficult. There's many problems with our political, this kind of adversarial political system that we're in, majoritarian democracy. We've got a particular highly centralized model of political power in this country. So there's a whole lot of things that are wrong with it. And I think we can do a lot to to do things better. But at the same time, I suppose what I got a real appreciation of is that you're doing things, making decisions on behalf of, 4.5 million, 5 million people or whatever it is now, and if you're doing things that's out of step with the people, and I don't mean people in a kind of abstract manner, I mean actual real living people, who don't always agree with me, if you're too far out of step with those people, then you're not actually representing them. And if you're not representing them, who are you representing? So it's like you're saying about with your appeasing your constituency, you've kind of, you're trying to show leadership, you're trying to make good decisions, you're trying to look at the big picture and say, what do we need to do? But at the same time, you are representing people, and you're there by the will of people, because they vote for you or not. So it's I see, like, one of the things that disturbs me with some of the kōrero down at the protest and that, and I saw it over in the Trump stuff when they tried to hold up the Joe Biden's kind of taking power, is this idea that a small bunch of people actually know better. And in fact, people saying, oh, we need to get rid of the parliament, we need to get rid of all those politicians, hang them, is what some people are saying. Minority, that's what some people are saying. You're actually talking about a coup. Yeah. And, that's actually, you're talking about a takeover.
Sedition.
Yeah. And in whose interest are you talking about that?
Because revolution comes at a cost.
I'm a real believer in constitutional change. And I think we have to, and one of the things about, one of the reasons I'm a Republican is because I don't believe that we can have the kind of political organisation that we need while we see the Queen as the sovereign, the source of sovereignty, the font of justice and all things good in the British Crown. To me, that makes no sense. And that's kind of how our system is structured. It's on this idea that power actually comes from the Crown, the British Crown. And until we kind of go, no, actually power comes from the ground. Yeah. From people on the ground, then I don't believe that our system is able to recognise tino rangatiratanga at all until we recognise that sovereignty rests with whānau hapu iwi.
You just kind of you tripped me up there for a second because I was like, what? How can
Republican?
He's Republican? I was thinking Democrats and Republican. But speaking to Aotearoa being a Republican away from the Crown. And so when you made that move, then so you decided to move into you were gonna was it? Did you go directly into the Green Party, or did you come from the Alliance? Like when you decided to get into politics, and you were moving from the space of activism into that space of government, what was the general vibe from the people that were around you at the time? Was there like that feeling of you crossing, going over to the other side? Was that kind of around at that time when you decided to move? Obviously, you brought a lot of supporters with you and you got votes, but how was that generally felt within the sort of the activist movement that you were rolling with?
Yeah, first of all, I joined the Greens the day they left the alliance. I actually went to the Hoyas. It was at Taputaranga Marae, which, you know, sadly is now gone, right? But that's where that Hoyas, that place hosted a lot of really important events in the kind of the cultural, social landscape of Aotearoa in recent times. But yeah, it was there, and the Greens were discussing whether to leave the alliance. And I spoke there as an outsider, you know, making the point that while the Greens were in the alliance, they could never kind of fulfill their own vision, really. And then the majority voted to leave. And so I joined as a member. And in fact, what happened as well, Donald, and I got involved with some people in Auckland, and then we had a regional conference, and Rod Donald heard me speak there. He may have heard me in Wellington as well, I'm not sure. And then he actually invited me to start up a youth wing of the Greens modelled on what was happening in Australia called the Wild Young Greens. And it was kind of a youth wing. And we kind of got together and went, well, that's not really what we wanted to do. We wanted to start up a non-violent direct action wing of the Greens. So we started the Wild Greens, and then the Wild Greens were involved in quite a number of fairly militant actions, like, so, you know, uprooting genetically engineered potatoes at Lincoln University because at the time people were only just becoming aware about genetic engineering. There'd been no real public discussion, so it was going ahead with very little regulation and no democratic discussion about whether people wanted this to be part of Aotearoa. So that's what that was about. We went to clubs. We used to, and now they've just legalized it, but we used to go into clubs and do test, bring your pill over, we'll test your ecstasy for you and tell you what's in it. And actually found very little MDMA in the stuff we were testing, found quite a bit of ketamine and different things. And then that got on the home show. I had to ring up Jeanette Fitzsimons and say, oh, just letting you know we're going to be on the home show tonight.
testing drugs.
What?
She would have been supportive though, I imagine.
Yeah, she was good. She was good value. Yeah. And we used to do critical mass bike rides, and so quite a few different things. So in the beginning, it was like what we were doing was doing a lot of activist stuff, still attached to the Greens, although independent. Like, we weren't asking for permission, from the leadership or anything like that. And I had a lot of support from the activists that I knew. I was concerned that the Rasta community would not support, because most Rastas are pretty generally hostile to involvement in kind of formal politics. But what I found was a lot of Rastas really supported it as well, because there is a tradition of that within Rasta with Sam Brown and people like that in Jamaica. So actually, by and large, I think I got a lot of support. And in fact, a lot of people told me that they voted for the first time in their lives. Quite older people, voted for the first time in their lives because they saw someone that felt like them in some way, for the first time. But it's true that I did get some individuals who were, there's some people who think if you become a politician, suddenly you're corrupt and, have no ethics and that kind of thing, and it's like, it just happens the day you get voted in, suddenly you transform into this other person. And some people, that's what they were like, but it was a small number, really. I think most people were pleased to see someone a bit different in there.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely noticing it with Dad at the moment, and just purely on the fact that he's been public about himself being vaccinated or getting the vaccination, and how that's kind of polarized, and basically meant he's a sellout or a kupapa.
I've seen some of those comments.
Yeah.
It's outrageous. Who the fuck are you to say something like that? Honestly, this man, I can't believe the audacity. Hey.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And often it's young Māori too, and I think it speaks to the situation that we're currently in around just if you are in the other camp or perceived to be in the other camp, outside of their in-group, then you become this 2D caricature. You must be a sellout, that everything that you've done just completely, and that's how they really see it, which is quite a worry, whether it's the algorithm inside of social media that's causing that tribalism, and they're becoming quite, radicalized, I guess, inside of those spaces. And so they see anything outside of their in-group as a threat, as a sellout, and they can't quite even entertain any of the reasoning that you have. Quite often, actually, they don't have necessarily the reasoning skills in that space, and that can be part of the issue as well, that compounds it. But, I guess segueing into local government while we have some time. And
can I just respond to that just
Sure.
a second? I know you saying stuff. I just want to say that I think it's a really important thing, and I think online engagement, the nature of it, I think, is part of it, because I get people say pretty rude things to me at times, and sometimes I'll take it offline and I'll say, hey, you know who I am, you know me.
Yeah.
And when you engage with them personally, it's different. And I heard you guys talking with Linda about, debating ideas down at the pub. And when it's face to face, it's different. Like all those people who say that about your dad, I very much doubt they would be saying that to his face.
It's true.
And so somehow this thing becomes detaches us from each other, and then people say all kinds of things. But the other thing is that it's also, we are becoming more polarized. And I see it from all sides of the discussion, actually, whether it's that issue or other issues. People just can't entertain the thought that someone could think something different and have a good reason, a genuine reason for thinking that. And we have to overcome that. We've got to start, we can have disagreement, we can make our point, but we've got to come back to the idea that debating an issue is about enlarging everyone's understanding.
Sure.
It's not about winning. It's about
right.
a good debate. We should all go away with a richer understanding.
I love the opportunity for my ideas to be challenged, because it allows me to actually go, I think this, and then sometimes, that people come up with really good points, and I'm like, that's actually something I hadn't considered. That's a factor that, I should probably take into consideration, because these things are always incredibly complex. And if you're trying to simplify it into, black and white, good and evil kind of scenarios, I think you don't do the issues and the kaupapa and challenges that are ahead of us justice. And I guess, that was my segue into local government, was around futures for local government, because in many ways we are seeing constitutional change happening now through reform of the Resource Management Act, the Three Waters, which I still have certainly concerns around, much along with the councils that are taking the Crown, I guess, the Nanai to court over just the one step too close towards privatisation, potentially. I'm not sure whether I have been convinced that there is enough safeguards in place. And I think that is the concern, like you were saying, around genetic altered material, whether or not it's been through the democratic process that it needs to make everyone feel really comfortable that the next government or the government after that, it's not an easy step for them, much like with, I guess, the privatisation of our telecommunications. They didn't just sell telecom, they sold the land and the wire and the copper, and then later on they're having to separate them into two different, chorus and spark to be able to pull these things apart. And I have the same fear around that. But just really futures for local government around how we imagine governing ourselves in the future. Is it, is the current form of representation that we have where people like us get voted in or not, or whether it's better to have, like citizen assemblies, people who are removed necessarily from the getting potentially too comfortable with their seats and just becoming career local politicians. So just, wanted to have a little talk to you about that, because I enjoy your thinking around that, my bro.
there's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there. Start wherever you want. What's your pet thing around futures for local government? What's your?
I'll just come to the three waters for a second, then I'll come on to that bigger question. And in a way, what's happened is they've come the wrong way round. We should have had the bigger question first and then done the water reform. But it is what it is, and I think partly the government's responding to some urgency around the fact that there's a whole lot of resource consents coming up in 2026, and councils won't be able to just roll them over because the standards have changed, especially in terms of water discharges and things like that. And a lot of councils just haven't put in the haven't started doing the work, which they needed to start doing years ago to be there in time, and they're not even, some of them haven't even started. So I think the government's genuinely responding to some urgency. To be honest, for me, the privatisation thing is not a big concern. I think one of the reasons why they have put what they're calling mana whenua representatives into the governance is actually as a safeguard for that. I think privatisation of the water becomes much more difficult as soon as you involve tangata whenua. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've done that. And that's a good thing. And because the way they've structured the ownership of these new water service entities that they're planning to put in place, the ownership of those will still rest with councils. And so I don't know that it would be any really more simple for a government to privatise in terms of politically, in terms of the political fallout. Privatisation for me is not the big concern. I think we do need reform. I think that's pretty much well understood. We had a thing in council the other day, Alan Sanson from the Waikato District Council talking about the work they've done at working with other councils to amalgamate some of their water services. And I became really convinced that there are genuine practical benefits from working at a bigger scale. Both in terms of the cost of delivering the service, so it makes it cheaper for people. The people working there have got better career paths because they're part of a bigger structure. I think there's a whole lot of benefits around amalgamation. The question is whether the scale that the government's talking about is the right one, because you're talking about 4 entities across the whole country, and that's huge. And there's a whole lot of issues around the governance of that. What they're proposing at the moment, I think, is really problematic because it's really complicated. It looks real clunky, but at the same time, half those layers don't do very much, and there's very little local accountability. So the government has said they've set up a working party to look at the governance, and there's a few issues which you can talk about if you want to. The government's prepared to look at some of them, but the bigger question of having those 4 entities, they're not prepared to kind of rethink. And to me, some people are really straightforward. To me, it's not a straightforward question whether it's a good thing or not. And the other thing I'll say is there's a lot of people who I think are opposed to it because there is mana whenua representation in there. Inadequate though. People are saying it's he pua, it's a Māori takeover,
I think there's a group of ratepayers. There's probably from, I think some of them from Tauranga and a couple of other areas who are mounting a legal challenge around that Māori are being too favoured within the Three Waters restructuring.
But the reality is Māori get very little say in any case. The say is really at a very high level. Currently appointing the panel, which will appoint the board, is really what the only power that's there. So it's not like actually Māori are having a massive new say. Although there is there is some involvement, which and at the moment the councils pretty much just do what they do. So, but I think that the thing is that really should have come. Ideally, that should have come after that bigger discussion about the future of local government.
Sure.
And I think that's a really good conversation to have, and it's a difficult conversation to have. But at the moment, local government is created by the Local Government Act, and it can be changed by a simple majority of Parliament, and has been many times. And so what it means is that local decision making in terms of councils is, it's always at the whim of the Parliament. And I think, in terms of constitutional change, there's lots of things I would like to see in that. But one of the things is, I think there should be some kind of inherent jurisdiction, if you like, like a right to local decision making. Because right now the government could just get rid of it all, theoretically, overnight, without any constraint, you know. I think there has to be some constitutional recognition of the right to local decision making, and then how you structure that and how you balance that between mana whenua and kind of crown structures like councils, you know, there's a big discussion to be had there. And then the other thing is, what should, like, so if we're talking about councils as an example, what are the kind of things that local councils should be doing? Because you could argue that councils aren't well set up to do, say, water, because it takes big lumpy investment. It's one of the reasons why councils have found it hard to put in the investment in time, is because councillors don't want to put the rates up, and this stuff's really expensive, and so they've kind of deferred and pushed it back to keep rates down, and that's just not really working very well. So, you know, you could argue, well, maybe it would be better to kind of depoliticize things like water and just make it's just a technical issue in some ways,
rather than a politicized one.
But then maybe there's other crown things that councils could do better, like housing. You know, maybe the council would be better at building housing locally than you know, kāinga ora, you know, or maybe council would be better at I don't know, you know, maybe there's other things that are more to do with kind of place and community and connection and understanding local conditions and local people.
Because there certainly seems to be a lot of inefficiencies and crossover between central government agencies, even like, say, social welfare and health with the councils. You know, a lot of these issues do intersect, you know, around housing and well-being and economy and those sorts of things, local economy. But, you know, trying to, as you know, I'm in the regional space as a regional councillor, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different district councils, and, you know, we try to get along. There's a lot of egos in there, and you know, we're humans, so it's definitely politics. So we've got our regional plan, you guys have got your district plan, which kind of comes out of that, and then you've got central agencies which are a complete different law to themselves quite often, and never the twain shall meet. And so I certainly do get the feel sometimes that there is, or often, that there are people in Wellington who probably have the best of intentions. They're just doing their job, officials, and they make up these policy statements which we need to bring into effect, and they don't actually have that awareness on the ground on how that rolls out and what sort of impact locally that it's going to have. And I think certainly post-COVID, I think COVID has been a catalyst for bringing those agencies together. Around COVID, I see a lot more sort of regional leadership groups that have the various agencies, local government representatives, a lot of staff, as well as iwi sitting on those groups. And so hopefully out of that kind of mixture, as we talk about the future for local government, there may be something in there. But I absolutely agree with you that we got it a bit ass about face, that we should be having this bigger conversation before, because we might have arrived in a different place if we'd had this bigger conversation around what it is that local governance and government would do, and potentially that could have answered a lot of questions around the water space rather than rushing in and doing this reform. Because I agree, you know, there is definitely efficiency and scale. There's certainly been years and years of certain politicians pandering to ratepayers, saying, I want my rates to be down, and so they'd keep the rates down at the detriment to the maintenance program for this essential infrastructure. That certainly happened across the country. So you're right, there did have to be reform. And I take your point as well, actually, having mana whenua, I hadn't thought about that. As inside of that governance space to protect it from potential privatisation. My question was, who are the people that are actually going to be doing the work on the ground? And generally, probably within this kind of structure, they're not going to be public servants. It's probably going to be the private sector who are going to be doing the actual work on the ground. So that's where I kind of...
I think they'll just take all the council staff, to be honest. Alan Simpson was saying that's what they did over there, because they went in, they ended up going in with water care, and they just took all their staff. But he said for them as a council, their commitment was to support and protect their staff and make sure that they got a good deal. And he said they did. And the ones he's spoken to since are really happy, because they're now part of a big organisation. They can develop new skills that they, in a small council, you just don't have the same opportunity to grow as you do in a much more complex, organisation. So I think there's definitely some good benefits in there. Yeah.
You've talked about bro, over since you've been in regional council, we've had discussions. You've talked about the complexity of it, and how they're complex issues, and there are the incremental policy change involves complex consideration. Is what you're saying that's the with this future of local government, that there's potentially a much simpler, could it be simplified, and that it's complex because the system is complex?
I think with the ROMA reforms, that's what they're talking about, isn't it? Because at the moment you've got these different layers, and they're just going to remove some of that. And so instead of having your regional plans, then your little district plans, and then they're not necessarily all linked, they're talking about one unified plan, isn't it? That's what I understand is going on. So I think that there is a lot of potential to make the regulatory stuff a lot simpler, which I think would be really helpful.
Do you think the way that it's currently structured, it's out of reach for those people living in those areas? Because I wonder, I'm listening to you guys talk, and I'm keeping up, but as I'm like, far out, this is intense. This is like, there's all these councils. I think okay, back in the day, Dad, you were going to do a protest and you just go to government, right? And but maybe it was a local government issue, because that complexity is not really there. So it's not really understood. It's just like, it's all government. It's not, this is a small council that hasn't resourced to do this work. And so it gets pushed up to the top of the tree. But so what I'm wondering is how you think that it becomes more accessible to those who are actually voting, sure, but do they know? And I know, bro, you were struggling with getting people to understand the difference between a regional council,
and a district council,
Whakatane district council, those kind of things.
We get blamed for your crap, Toi.
Yeah. And I let you take the blame often, bro. I go, no, screw WDC. But I also get caught up by at least 12 times this year. in the last year, I've been called up for district council issues. And I've, because I know kind of where these things sit, I can actually still assist and call the right people in the right places and help out these constituents, even though it's within a different council, because I have the relationships and the awareness of where these things sit. So I don't mind necessarily. But no, to answer your question, bro, I think civics education is just so poor in this country, just full stop. People don't know what it takes to keep the roads not full of potholes, to keep the water running in your tap, to keep storm water that's coming onto the road from polluting your river, when you put your rubbish out, where that goes. People just kind of take a lot of things for granted and don't know what the cost and responsibility of citizenship to a largely really, successful society. Of course, like you were saying before, bro, these are a lot of like holes, and we're always striving to do better. But when I look around and I think of, just the human condition and the dynamic, I'm quite amazed that we've ended up in this space. When I sit at the council table sometimes, and I'm sitting across from representatives from other communities, and they exist and they're there in numbers, and they believe the world is how they see the world. Yeah. And they have a right to representation. And so when you have that tension between ideological differences, the fact that we're not all killing each other, the fact that we have a certain amount of rules that everybody respects so that we can largely get along peacefully without, you know, knocking off your neighbor because they built their fence too high, or their dogs, you know, there is a certain amount of, I think I've certainly come to appreciate the role of civilized organization and how difficult that is. And so I sit at the table and I think it's quite amazing that, because as councils, we don't collect tax, we collect rates. And that we rate people and they put money in, and then we sit there and try to provide services and regulate the community so that people don't kill each other, so that industry doesn't. I mean, if you go to any place in the world and there's no local government, watch industry come in and just completely rape and pillage and dump their pollution, you know, so I have a respect for it. So I think that's the first answer to your question, my bro, is civics education. I think people don't have an understanding of what it takes to have the privileges that we have today. Because we live like, you know, in terms of relatively in human history, we live like goddamn kings and queens. But
Can I add to that as well? Because I absolutely agree with that. I think it's a major lack in our education system that we have very little civics education. I believe this of the parliament, I believe this of local government, that we have one of the most open democracies in the world. It's actually not difficult to influence legislation. It's not difficult to influence local politics, but most people have got no idea how the system works, and so they just don't have the tools to know how to do that. And so what happens is all the corporates, they employ ex-MPs or ex-councillors as their lobbyists who know the whole thing inside out. They got personal relationships with the minister or the mayor or whatever it is. And so they just know their way all the way through those corridors of power. And then ordinary people in the community are left, they've got no idea what's going on. And even like here in Whakatane, one of the, you know, an obvious example is the community in Awatapu, which is probably one of the poorest communities in Whakatane town, who has been neglected by council for decades and decades and decades. The playground, you know, the basketball hoop had fallen down and nobody was doing anything to repair, but Ohope, you know, gets all the flash kind of thing. And the reason why is because people in Ohope expect a level of service and they demand it from their council, and if they don't get it, they make a lot of noise. And people in Awatapu, by and large, have probably come to believe that's all that they're going to get. And so they don't make any noise. So this last year, for the first time, we had a delegation from Awatapu come and present to the long-term plan with an ask, a couple of asks of quite big money, and council listened to them and went, yeah, we'll do that. You know, sure. And at the same time, we've got money for the playgrounds. So the playgrounds had a massive maintenance thing because the people in Awatapu are starting to, and I'm not trying to victim blame. I'm not, you know, that's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm just saying, you know, it's that old squeaky wheel, right? Gets the oil. If people don't know how to make their voices heard, and or don't even expect that they're going to be heard, then they're not. You know.
So just to follow up from that then, so civic education, okay, all good. I kind of want to back up just a touch and just say, you know, I feel like because of these layers of complexity that are currently sitting there in the place, there is this governmental fatigue, you know, being governed. There being there's fatigue from being governed by all these different components, right? And so the idea of civic education, that sounds that sounds good. How, you know, how that gets done and where that gets done. Do you think that civic education would help with some of the discussion points that are happening in Wellington at the moment? Do you think that that's something that might you know, inform or help better educate in terms of process is that the place to start? Because right now, like I said, if you're thinking about Dad and back in his day, and if in their understanding and their civic education, and how they might have brought through their issues and been quite effective in what they were doing, and so in that pathway, yeah, do you think that could, you know, I get a sense right now, particularly with Ngā Tamatoa and the groups that have worked through these processes. I really desperately wanted to ask Linda if she had the opportunity, and Dad, this might be a question you could answer, is if you had the opportunity to go back and tell your 20-year-old self what you know today, and in terms of the actions that you took, does the action back then only work because they were young and didn't quite know what they were doing? I think Toda called it imperfect action, and that's how it all happened, you know. And it was born from that, and that's how it actually created the change, versus a more constructive, or I don't know, constructive's not the right word, but you know what I'm saying, where it's less
idealism,
it's less understanding of it. Yeah. And so is that what pushes it forward, or is it possible to take the knowledge that you have today, Dad, give it to your 20-year-old self, so that what kind of society would we be living in now had you been able to talk to yourself? Yeah,
I think I'm just quickly going back to where I was, and we weren't in the picture at all. We weren't even allowed into it. And you literally had to kind of bully your way in, and in a way, because of the way the system was structurally kind of made up, it wasn't designed for people like us, you know, and it didn't have the language. In fact, we didn't exist, literally. So you had to literally physically had to kind of walk in front of me, hey, yeah, hey, you know, like that, you know, and so you're gonna do that first. You know, and you know, a very small group of us had to, hey, you know, so just sort of simple action like that. And when you go through that, you literally, the door was locked out. You're locked out. You can't even walk into the door. So you strategically had to kind of, it's like a game of chess. So you strategically had to kind of go back to, where shall I make my next move? Shall I go to pawn, or shall we go checkmate? So it's like that. So we didn't have a manual book. A lot of that was just by feelings. You know, I didn't feel good. You know, you go through it. It's just like kind of happening. I mean, Ohope, they got a community. They're very clear what they want. They don't want logging trucks going through their community. So what do? They make sure no logging trucks go through the Ohope. They go through the Tāneatua. You know, so they're very clear as to. So they make a noise out of it. And if the truck keeps still going through the Ohope, they'll be standing in the middle of the road, make sure the truck doesn't go there. So having that kind of action. You know, so I see that kind of action, and that's really where we were at that time. So we didn't quite understand. So we didn't really have strategically had some of those language or the policy. We weren't even thinking about policy. All we know that I want you to hear what we want to say at that kind of situation. I mean, even you fellas talking to now, right at this very moment, I'm listening to you. How can you take that language down to people in Awatapu? You know, all they hear you sound like a bullhead. You know, and that's how people think. You know, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I know the language. But for a lot of people down, they're lost straight away. Yeah, they're just bit hard to absorb.
I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, bit hard to absorb. That sound, God. Yeah, no. So that's why art, you know, it's like art. You got to paint the picture so people can see it without really saying anything, whether it be in the color red or yellow, and so they can go, yeah. I like the color of yellow. The color of yellow means like this for me. It looks like water. It looks like tree. It looks like a fish. You know, all of that. So we really need to reconstruct the wording It's the language.
It's like
so people can understand that.
It's like our user interface is terrible.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? You need all the back end, but the user interface sucks, and so nobody wants to interface with it. And that is, I don't have an answer. I don't know how, because when you go into local government, you pick up the language and you go, okay, so that makes sense, but it is another language.
So I've got, there is something that, so I'm on the board of the New Zealand Music Commission, and this is my sort of second time round. I was on it for 5 years, took a break, and I've come back on again. And actually in that time, what they've implemented is a governance intern. So this is somebody who comes in, is younger generally, and just gives them the experience to sit on a board and understand the idea of governance. Is that something, because you're talking about civic education, maybe that is actually the future of government, is to make sure that their constituents understand civics, and so have to start incorporating into that system a way to educate from within, not just going, oh yeah, that's on the schools or the education department, because then that's kind of pushing it in the wrong place, but actually like developing a situation where you can start to get people involved and in a constructive way within local government without necessarily having the burden, you know, and starting to understand how those systems work. I don't know, just an idea.
Can I make a couple of comments? I think there's a whole lot of issues actually that that are difficult. So the first thing is that there's a language that you know when you're in there, you just absorb this language and you start using it, and it alienates other people because they don't understand what that means. The acronym, you know, like those little the little words that you talk about. So I think there's a thing about the language, which is difficult. But the other thing is that the content is also difficult, because you're dealing with a lot of really complex, big issues, and to understand it, regardless of the language, to understand some of those issues, you actually got to spend a bit of time working through it and figuring it out. And most people can't be bothered, don't have the time, they've got other issues they got to deal with. And so, you know, so most people just don't have the capacity. I don't mean the intellectual capacity. I mean, they just don't have the time, you know, to actually get into it to understand some of those issues. And I think that's one of the things about there are some having elected councillors. There are some problems because people get elected and they don't necessarily have the right skills to make the decisions that they're making. You know, but the really good thing about a democratic system like that is it's the role of the councillors, I think, to reach to their constituents and translate the language and the issues into ways that people can understand. And to me, that's one of the kind of requirements of a good councillor, is someone who can go into the community, whatever that community is, and speak in the language that's meaningful for them to make sense. And then the other thing is, people give you, like Troy talked about, he gets stuff about WDC. When I was an MP, I got stuff about council. Now I get stuff that MPs need to deal with. And it's the role of the councillor to translate to the community, but in the other direction as well, to take all that grab bag of things that people bring up and are concerned about and translate that into what does that mean for our organisation? What does that mean for those guys over there, those people over there? You know, so I think one of the roles of a councillor is to be like a communication channel. And I think that's one of the things that helps quite a lot. The other thing I was going to say, and I'm going to leave the issue of trucks in Tāne Ata, because there are some technical issues around why the trucks don't go through Ohopi, but I won't go into that right now.
No, it's because you don't care about the Maoris. You don't care about the Maoris. You favour the Pākehās.
One thing that I was going to say about, because Wairere, you brought up about, you know, what's happening in Parliament and whether it would help if those people had some civics. And I think for some people, definitely, I mean, I detect in both the people I'm hearing from down there and just in the general kind of social media discussions, that there's a lot of people who just don't understand how the system works and what the system's capable of. So people have these paranoid delusions about, oh, they're sending EMF rays to da-da-da-da-da, and just don't, like, you know, the government's just not capable of doing half the things that people are paranoid about.
I totally.
Actually, we came up with a term for that last week with Tina Nata. It was conspiracy of incompetence. It's actually it's actually not some grand conspiracy. It's just incompetence half the time.
Yeah. Half the time, exactly. And so so people have these they just don't understand what the system is capable of doing, or even what it could do. Like there's certain things to do. You'd have to change all kinds of things, and you couldn't do that without unnoticed. So I think civics would definitely help people to some people to come back to a more perspective and a more sense of reality. But the other thing what's going on down there, I think, is, there's some stuff that's just simply not true, and we know it's being spread. There's a whole lot of stuff that's being spread deliberately, misinformation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think we can ignore the fact that a lot of people are down there, and it's about the mandate, but it's not as well. I think a lot of people have a deep sense of grievance about where our country's going, and the mandate's a simple target. It's an easy thing to focus on. Yeah. But actually, the issues are around growing inequality, a housing crisis that we don't seem to be doing anything about, people losing their job. You go down the supermarket, food's twice the price as what it was a week ago.
That's what I'd be hammering the government about, not about the mandates. I know some people have lost their jobs and they're very angry about that. But the growing inequality, the growing inequality, the fact that they haven't been able to deal with the housing issue, that houses are still these commodities rather than a right of being a citizen of this country, that you should be able to have housing. And it's become this commodity that is traded, and they haven't been able to deal with that. They haven't been able to deal with the fact that they only get tax generated through a very narrow source of taxing people's salary rather than capital tax. There's some real things that people should be making a lot of noise about and protesting down there. But that seems to have been hijacked by the sense of, we've lost our freedom. And for me, that just, it's quite frustrating.
It's a shame because it's turned a collective issue into an individualistic issue. And I think that's one of the problems, and that's what's happened to our society over the last few decades. We've actually moved to a much more individualistic way of looking at our rights and what we deserve as people. And it's a shame. It's a shame because it's a neoliberal con.
and that's the thing too, is that you realize when you go into places of governance, is that you realize you're just there as a community representative. People think you've got this grand power, but you actually go in there and there is a machinery that has been running for ages by highly paid, very skilled, very smart bureaucracy. And they run things. And we're there to try and keep a check on that power because they're actually really, really powerful. And it is tied into the whole neoliberal, capitalist, global world. And it's not just a Pākehā thing, you got China, you got India, it's a global corporation that is just running things like that. And as the regional council, we own the port of Tauranga. And so that actually subsidizes 50% of every ratepayer inside of the Bay of Plenty. So everyone who lives and pays rates inside of the Bay of Plenty is a beneficiary of the port, but at the same time, that ties into the whole capitalist system. That and if suddenly we shut down the port because we're against capitalism, people's rates would double and they'd freak out because of the impact on the individual rather than the collective good, as Nandor was saying before. So these are the complexities. I don't think, bro, whether or not you can simplify the work, but I think Nandor's right. As a good representative, you need to be a translator. You need to be able to go and answer questions in a way, and it is different depending on who you're talking to. Whoever's in front of you, who the crowd is, you try to shift your languaging, shift the way that you talk about it. So, me and Nandor get a bit carried away because we're talking face to face, so our language starts to go local government talk. So it's great that you brought that up because it is really important that we're able to communicate these things. And I think we shouldn't just leave it up to the education system to suddenly pump out a curriculum of civics. I think that it is actually upon local government, on representatives to try. Nandor, we do actually have some really good engagement staff. Their role, we have a whole department inside of council, and their whole role is to go out and find ways to engage the public. So they'll turn up at different events that are community events, and they'll have a little tent, and they'll have a little sort of board, and they'll have these little things, and they'll go, oh, what's the priority for you? And you put your little thing up on that, and they kind of collect that data, and they try to come back. You know, that tries to get an engagement and get the view of the public and those who turned up, but it doesn't necessarily educate on that space either. So I keep bringing it up at our council that we need to play more of a role in terms of civics education. How we do that, I don't know, but it's certainly a conversation.
It's difficult. I mean, we're the same. I think our organisation has tried really hard over the last few years to find new ways of reaching out into the community and ways of reaching out into communities that we haven't engaged well with before. Because, you know, you do the old put out the long-term plan, write a submission. There's a whole bunch of people who are really good at that. They do it every time. They know exactly what they're doing. But how do you reach into those other communities?
Most people don't know what a long-term plan is. What's a long-term plan?
No, exactly. That's right. You know, so it's so kind of, as you say, turning up at places with maps and sticky notes, or putting out videos, and like really trying to get more creative about how we reach. And, you know, full respect, I think people have done a really good job. Although there's lots more to do. But when we did our climate change stuff, we went out in a few different rounds to try and just test the support we had for taking quite a strong stance around climate change and making some quite strong commitments. And we got really good feedback, and we got a push from the community to actually go be more ambitious in what we were talking about. But one of the things that we were trying to do there was look at how do we do a bit of education around the issue at the same time as asking people, because there's no point asking people about something they don't know anything about. And also looking at, well, asking people what were the sources of information for them, so that we could have a bit of a program of how could we kind of amplify some of those sources of information, so that just to help spread information a bit more. Because I think you're right, we've got to take some responsibility for kind of helping people understand the issues that we're dealing with, as well as just asking them about things.
Cool. Well, amazing kōrero, you fellas. We've hit our 2 hours, so
okay,
we out.
Feels like we're just hitting our stride too.
Yeah, I'm just getting going.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know we could talk about this stuff for way too long.
I'm also conscious that it's my brother's. He's campaigning now, aren't you, bro?
Yeah, well, we both are. Nando as well, and it is October, and I mean that's why I've started to make some content. I made that little TikTok and Instagram, and
that was funny, bro. That was good.
And for me, I think it's about comedy. A bit of comedy does help it stick, hopefully, but it's quite difficult as just it's a lot of work. Kind of actually, it looks easy, but actually, it takes a bit of work producing those sorts of things. Because generally, if I just went and we spoke about this stuff, I mean, hopefully, I actually want to cut some of this up tonight. That's why we're not playing music underneath it, so that we can actually cut some of this together and get some really good little sound snippets and try to create content. Because our dear engagement people at our councils, unfortunately, they're very corporate, and when I watch the stuff that they try to produce to educate the community, the engagement on social media is just terrible. You can see the numbers there, and they really turn that off. But it's really difficult within that corporate space to create engaging content. Like my one, I think I said fuck like 3 times in it, and I don't have to worry about it. Staff can't do that. I can, and it kind of gives me a little bit of like edge. Maybe talk about my cock and balls campaign, because that's the reality of it, and that's the difference that elected representatives, we've got that freedom and that breadth and width. Staff don't have that. They can't do that at all. They've got to stay they've got
to take it seriously. We don't have to take, we can be light. We can take the piss out of ourselves.
Yeah, and plus it speaks to that idea of transforming the message, right, from what you were saying before, which is taking it and being able to communicate to your community in a way that they connect with, and humor is definitely part of that.
And it's even just doing this. This is actually a part of it. Having these conversations, having it available, you know, if you reach 1-2 people, I think that's really important and makes a shift. If a couple of people from watching this are a little bit more informed and go, oh, okay, I kind of get that now. I just tell people ask questions because I'm happy to answer questions. If anyone has any questions around anything, and then I find that's actually the best form of education. If people go, how does that work? Why da-da-da-da-da-da? And when that happens, I'll go, actually, this is kind of what it is. And I can speak a lot freer than staff can. Staff have to be very careful about what they say. Yeah. Me is just, you know, they can't do anything about me. You know, they can kind of try to censure me as much as they can, but they really can't. We're elected officials. So I think we've got to, you know, putting ourselves, I think, bro, into spaces where we can ask questions. That's why I do actually hope, you know, there's a potential that nobody's going to stand and that I won't have to contest the seat. But I really, really enjoyed having to go out and talk to people during the last campaign, because going out and meeting people and actually putting your ideas and values across and hearing from people, I think is a really important part. And I would really enjoy, now that I'm a bit more informed, going out and re-engaging within that quite concentrated time when there's a bit of buzz around it and there's a lot of that talk going on. I'd actually enjoy that opportunity, to the point where I might actually just turn up anyway, even if it is uncontested, and talk to people and, you know, jump in uninvited like I've done a couple of times. Yeah, but ka pai, bro, hey, thank you so much for coming on to talk about these kaupapa. It's really great. I've said this before. I'll switch Dad's one over. Where are you, Dad?
No, he's been playing around with the camera.
Oh,
he's gone. He's gone close up on the wide camera.
And out of focus.
Yeah, out of focus.
What happens when you talk too much?
Thank you for that, my way.
Yeah, no, great to have you on.
Good kōrero. And nā mihi nui ki a koe mō tēnei rā, mō tēnei pō.
Kia ora.
Mauri ora.
Yeah.
And if it's okay with you, we might get you on later on in the year, my bro. I think we've got more to talk about.
Yep. Yeah. That'd be good.
Cool.
Yeah, no, it's been good. I've enjoyed it.
Choice. Ka pai. Kia ora, my bro. Hey, gona.
Ko Māori.
Ko Māori. And so that's us. We got a few comments on there. The bro Asher, kia ora, my bro. When we were kids, Bank Peninsula Council set up a youth council to try to get to the bottom of youth suicide rates. I sat on it and got bored out of my mind. No doubt, my bro. No doubt. Oh, and it was good to see the sis Nahuia. Okay. It's Nandal's mate.
Oh, right. Yeah, Nahuia, right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So she was on there kind of agreeing with you, Wairere. the stuff is,
yes.
Yeah. And with
Dad,
she was like...
on, man.
Yeah, no, we will. Absolutely.
Yeah,
she's awesome.
Yeah, Nahuia would be good on other issues.
Man, she's her kōrero is amazing. I got a chance to listen to her kōrero in the Hui Ora conference, and that was one that was online. And man, she blew me away. And
yeah, they're a dynamic duo, those two.
Yeah. So that's no, we should make that one happen for sure.
No, definitely will.
Yeah,
Got a Māori maiden over on Twitch. She's been holding it down over on Twitch. Thank you for your support, Māori.
Yeah. And you're not, I quite like it, Dad. That painting's changed. You've lost the ninjas. The ninjas have gone.
Yeah, I took it away.
Yeah, that's dope. That looks cool.
I like it. It's intense. It feels like what's going on today.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. It looks quite kind of, like everyone's in their own little silos a little bit, different groups. Kind of, and there's the
fire.
Little wee cubicles.
And certainly send our thoughts out to the whanaunga out in the Ukraine as well. Aha ko te aha, whatever side, bloody, those war sucks, people. War sucks.
Oh, no Too Slick. Thanks for the sub there, Too Slick. Too much, mate.
Mean. Okay, whānau, that's us. Dad's already sat down. Okay. He thinks we're off here, but we're not. We're still talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. I don't know, mate. I thought we finished.
Okay, so the only thing is, so Thursday night, this is our first Thursday night, was a bit, maybe what we'll do is we'll advertise it and see what the uptake is like. It was a little bit lighter on the numbers tonight.
That's okay.
But that's okay. Get to play. Yeah, until people get
I
to
find
know
people come back and watch the show later on anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you can watch it
That's
live
true.
and you can interact if you're live. If you come along and you're, and we're not talking too much, we can interact with you. But you can't do that if you're watching the recording of the show. And the reason why we took the music out during the interviews is we found there's so much good kōrero that you want to cut together and kind of whakapotonia, just shorten it up a little bit and make it a bit tighter and put it on other platforms, but you can't do that when you've got music playing in the background. It's a bit of an issue. So
yes.
So we're
so
trying to figure out how
right now is figure out whether. That's right. Yeah. Trying to figure out how to separate the music from the recording so we can cut it up. And while I'm here, I just want to quickly try that, which is.
Because there's some good kōrero out of two of them. They're different kōrero from Lynn. It's good just to...
Oh, there's great kōrero in there.
And kōrero,
and with Tina Nata on Monday, she had some great kōrero there too. But, if you've got music playing in the background, you try and cut it together, you hear the music skip. And so that's where you can't kind of cut between it. It just sounds terrible. So... we were like, we'll just lose the music during the interviews at the moment so that we can repackage that content. But sweet as, we'll get there.
We'll get it. We'll get it.
Choice on whānau. Cheer my bro.
Bye-bye.